Welcome to the Startups Without Borders podcast. I'm Valentina Primo, and I'm the founder of this platform, this community, and this movement for entrepreneurs who are starting new ventures while starting new lives. Each week, we'll be sharing inspiring interviews with the most audacious startup founders while highlighting resources for anyone starting up. Gear up to get some real-life advice. You're listening to the Startups Without Borders podcast, episode 8. Today, we're bringing you the most anticipated panel at the Startups Without Borders Summit, Entrepreneurship is Survival. We teamed up with UNHCR and their project Telling the Real Story to bring two of the most audacious Egyptian entrepreneurs and adventurers, Omar Samra and Omar Nour. In this panel, Samra and Nour sit with media mogul Amy Mowafi to talk about taking risks, overcoming fears, and dreaming dreams bigger than life. Nour and Samra narrate their journey as they embarked on a mission to row across the Atlantic Ocean, dedicating this row to raising awareness of the global refugee plight. But in an ironic twist, they face the same challenges, terrors, and decisions that refugees face today. Their quest has now become the film Beyond the Raging Sea, directed by globally renowned director Marco Orsini in collaboration with UNHCR.
Omar Nour is a serial entrepreneur. He is a triathlete, like world champion kind of thing. This guy has done some amazing feats in the realm of extreme sports. And then Omar Samra also is a mountaineer extraordinaire, is also a serial entrepreneur and investment banker. And with us, moderating the conversation, is my former boss and CEO of one of the most amazing social media and marketing platforms out there. She has been coined as the queen of social media in the Middle East, Amy Mowafi, and they're going to be here on stage with us today. So ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together. I think I'm just stressed because it's my former boss.
Okay, so first of all, I am just so thrilled and excited to be here today on stage with the two Omars. Their stories and their journey and their vision is just such a daily source of inspiration for me. And I'm also very fortunate that I also get to call them my friends. So I'm so excited to be doing this today. Okay, so a lot of the character traits that you guys embody and the character traits that it takes to summit a seemingly impossible mountain, or to become an Olympic triathlete at an age when most have retired from the sport, or indeed to take on an Atlantic row. Traits like persistence and tenacity and vision and a kind of unwavering belief in what it is that you're doing, and fearlessness are, of course, many of the traits that we're all told we must embody to be successful entrepreneurs. And so what I'm hoping we can do today with our little chat is maybe kind of begin to crack the code through your stories and through your experiences about what it takes to achieve the seemingly impossible. So I want to start with this idea of fearlessness. Okay? I think people look at you and they think, oh my gosh, for them to make these decisions that they've made throughout their life and to take on this road, they must be absolutely fearless. Now, I think no one is truly fearless. I think just some people like you guys are able to go out there and do crazy shit anyway. And there was something that struck me when I interviewed you guys before you went on the row, and when I also watched the film. Not once do you use the word "we're scared." Not once. You talk about being concerned for your families. You talk about being worried for the people you love. You talk about the technicalities and the systems and the processes, but you never ever say, we are scared. So my question to you is, what does it take to face something knowingly that you know is terrifying, potentially fatal, and jump in head first anyway?
Amy, did you say we're a source of daily inspiration for you?
No, I exaggerated.
Okay,
I heard it.
That's not
I heard it. She said daily inspiration.
I'll hold you to that.
Okay.
Actually, one of the things that I really that I read that really stuck with me is that courage is not the absence of fear. It's the idea of having the fear and being able to go with the task nonetheless. Speaking for myself, I mean, a lot of people maybe don't know the context of what happened. So Omar and I set out in December 2017 to try and row across the Atlantic. That's 3,000 nautical miles from the Canary Islands to the Caribbean. And we covered about 1,000 kilometers over a period of 8-9 days. And then our boat capsized in a massive storm, 8-meter waves. The boat flipped. It's designed to self-right itself, but it didn't, and then the life raft didn't open, and then what followed was 13 hours fighting for our lives, not knowing if someone will be able to come and get us or if they knew where we were. And I have to admit that I was afraid, or almost even terrified at some points, but it was very clear to us that we had to control the fear, because if we had it take over, then we would be forced into a state of no action. We very quickly realized after the first hour that if we did not try to embetter our situation, then we will eventually perish. And as Omar said, actually in the documentary, it didn't come up in this trailer, but it was very clear when we first capsized that we had no idea how we were going to survive. And sometimes in business, in anything in life, you don't know where the answer is, you don't know where the result is, but you just have to keep putting one step in front of the other. And so maybe Omar, you want to reflect more on that?
Yeah, I mean, look guys, for me the subject of fear is something that's really important. There's no such thing as fearlessness. And I actually think if there is fearlessness, okay, so you watch a movie, right? And then Rambo comes out and he's like shooting, right? Complete lack of fear. And usually the guy that's shooting out in the open like this with complete lack of fear, he gets killed. Right? The one that has a fear of death and a fear of the situation is the one that's hiding. Okay, they may do something about it, right? And actually that's a perfect example, because what happens is some people end up freezing with fear, right? So I'm going to sit in the corner and wait until the guy finds me. Another person might say, all right, let me try to figure out a way to get me out of the situation. But fear is there. Fear is fuel. In my opinion, without fear, you can't do much. You have to respect the magnitude of whatever it is that you're about to do. As a triathlete, as a professional triathlete, when I'm out there in the morning of a race, and even 9 years into my career, you better believe the night before you don't sleep so well. You better believe you get butterflies in the morning, because that keeps you sharp. That keeps you ready. And that fear is important. And the fear of failure is also very important, because that motivates you. You don't want to look bad. You don't want to disappoint yourself. So in my opinion, fear is very crucial. And like Omar mentioned, and in business, it's the same thing, right? Like, if you're not afraid, so some people, one of my favorite things is, if your dreams don't scare you, you're not dreaming big enough. You guys are playing safe, right? You're playing safe.
Oh, yes, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So fear is crucial. I think fear is a very important fuel to be used and controlled. And like Omar mentioned, there were times during that day we were not going to come out. Okay, so to sit here and tell you, no, we weren't afraid of dying, no, we definitely were, but we didn't allow it to control our decisions.
So can I jump in?
Yeah, jump in.
Because I think the fear is something that lives in the brain, right? So your brain is basically the organ in your body that's there to keep you safe. So it will jump out when it's needed or when it's not needed to try and keep you safe, to try and get you scared and get out of a situation. And when you're thinking about this, is as entrepreneurs, we get an idea, we want to start a business, we can think, we can do the business plan, we can do anything. Our brain will get us just to the edge of the cliff, but it will never allow us to jump. And so in order to be able to kind of take that leap of faith, you have to depend on something else other than your brain. And so most athletes that, most people that sort of I've read about and have inspired me have always led from the heart. They've led always from a place of love. Love for them being able to make a difference. So that passion is really important, and it's very important to be calculating, to kind of weigh everything and get all your ducks in a row, but at the end of the day, it's something more. It's that heart, that's something else that's going to get you to take that step. And what stops people is not taking that first step. Once you're in there, once you're in the arena, you don't know the answers most of the time, but you're going to figure things out and you're going to roll with the punches. But it's most people, in my mind, most people that fail, they fail because they don't start, and that's really the key thing.
Yeah, I love this because what Omar just said, one of the things that I always talk about is the biggest crusher of dreams isn't failure, right? And we'll talk about that later. Amy, don't worry, I'm not going to failure. You're welcome. I got you. But it's the fear of failure. Like Omar just said, the fear of failure is the biggest crusher of dreams. And so like in my 20s, I started a whole bunch of startups. And about 8 out of the 10 that I started failed miserably, right? And the thing is this, though, is one of the things that I talk about when you're on the startup journey, it is like walking on the edge of a very, very steep cliff. And you're looking down, and you're like, this is the highest I've ever been. If I fall, I'm done. And you're afraid. And then you gotta keep on moving forward. And as you're moving forward and you get more and more successful, the path keeps on growing and it keeps on getting higher and higher. And every time you look down, you go, oh my God, this is definitely the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. And then when somebody reminds you, when you said that the first time, you're like, what? This was nothing. This was so easy, right? And it's the same exact thing in business. It's the same exact thing in life, right? You have to constantly be afraid. And another thing is, being comfortable, being uncomfortable. Being comfortable, being uncomfortable. Because that fear is uncomfortable. We don't like it. So human beings, what do? They try to stay in the middle. Let me stay safe. Let me just be comfortable. The second you're comfortable, you're not growing. So that's one of my mottos that I've always reminded myself every single day. You gotta be comfortable being uncomfortable. And once I get comfortable, I try to find something else. And actually, that's how this thing even happened, right? Because it's not really comfortable growing the ocean.
I want to give a chance to Amy to have a few words.
Amy? No. This is about you guys. This is totally about you guys, but I'm going to pick up about what you said about failure. And I think this is very interesting because there's a lot of areas where you guys are very kind of aligned. And I think this is perhaps, in terms of your public narrative and your public story, perhaps one of this area of failure is somewhere where you both kind of diverge. So you, Omar, have always been, Nour, have always had kind of failure and this idea of failure eventually leading to success, or the belief in your ability to succeed as being core to your narrative. You screwed it up, you screwed it up, you screwed it up, you backflipped it, you fell off and you got there in the end. And then even when you came so close to Olympic glory, you sustained an injury and you didn't quite get there. And that's a very powerful part of your story. We go to Omar Samra and your public narrative is actually very different. I wanted to climb Mount Everest, I climbed it. I wanted to do the 7 summits, I did it. I wanted to do North Pole, South Pole, I did it. I wanted to go to space, and I somehow win this competition against millions of people worldwide to have the opportunity to go to space. And then you guys both decide to take on this role, and it was also a kind of project in which you had a lot of naysayers, more so than usual. A lot of people going, these are, crazy ass guys. They are not going to pull this off. This is impossible. They are sacrificing their families, and it's a horrible idea. And the reality is, you guys didn't make it. Now, there's 2 interesting things for me from that and I think this is where a lot of people start to relate to the problem with failure, is that especially and also in the entrepreneurship ecosystem, because most of us, when we decide to go out on our own, everyone is telling us that we're crazy and everyone is telling us that we're going to fail. And then when you do fail, which happens, that thing of, oh my God, everyone, and you guys did that on such a public platform.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then my second thing, and this is really what fascinates me about what you guys did, no one talks about that. No one talks about the fact that you guys didn't actually make it across.
What are you doing, Amy?
Hold on. Somehow, the narrative has been spun to you guys being these superheroes who survived in the face of adversity, and you've also really managed to, and this is a tremendous positive of it, is this beautiful platform that really does powerfully spotlight the plight of refugees. So A, how do we deal with that public? And secondly, how do you then control the narrative in this incredible way that you guys have succeeded in doing?
I think what you're saying is Omar's fault.
What I heard you say is you called me a loser, and you said this guy's awesome, and then when you guys did it together, you messed him up. That's what I'm hearing. Is that about right?
No, actually,
okay. All right, cool. This is going to be fun.
I actually have something to say about that because it's true. Like what you're saying is true. What you're saying is true. With my space journey, I mean, I haven't achieved it. Like you said, I won that competition, and then the company that was supposed to take me to space ran out of money and went bankrupt in 2017. I'm still on that journey, but I haven't succeeded. There has been a lot of expeditions that I've gone through where I've failed, where I've had to turn back, and I have written about them. But somehow, in our part of the world, people don't want to hear about the failure stories. They don't want to publicize it. It's almost like we want to have these, like, if we want to look at someone as a role model, if you want to look at someone as a success story, we tend to kind of try to negate the fact that these people had struggles, they had failures, and so on. I think if you look at the U.S. in terms of as a startup culture, they put people who fail, even people who fail on a huge scale, they're put up like on pedestals. The stories of failure are considered like, some of the most revered stories out there. And because, to be able to fail and then go back and go back and go back, that requires much more tenacity, much more belief in yourself and belief in the thing that you're doing than to continue to succeed. I tried recently, and I did this experiment even on social media. I tried to start doing posts where I'm talking about the things that I didn't achieve, and it seems that people either don't read the text and just assume it's another post about me saying that I've done something or whatever. And it's interesting because it's like even when we're looking at, I don't know, as a culture, I don't know if you see it. I mean, you live in Dubai. I don't know if it's the same thing, but here in Egypt, it's definitely, if you're succeeding, great. You could be somebody who's had a series of successes, and then you fail once, and then you're a nobody, and all of a sudden nobody is interested in your story anymore, or at least in terms of like, giving you credit or...
I agree. I mean, and I don't even think it's honestly excluded to the Middle East. I think it's also in the US, you see it. People like winners, right? People like the end story. But one of the things is, to me, about the subject is, I believe that most people in this world, like I mentioned earlier, live in the middle, in this fake safety net. It doesn't exist. There's no safety net. So, safety net, let me study very hard, get a good job, work 9 to 5. That's safer than going crazy and doing, your own startup or whatever. It's not true. It's not true. Anything can happen at any point. And most people that I know actually try to play it safe. They're like, all right, let me work on my thing. At night, on the side, I'm going to be working my new business, or I'm going to be doing my new adventure or whatever. And then eventually when this thing makes more money and I can support it, then I can quit this one to start working. It doesn't work. It never works. They never make that leap, right? Failure is a must, and in order for you to fail, you have to fail for me at least, I like to fail publicly. So a good example.
How do you deal with it? How do you deal with it is the question. I think that's very relevant.
Okay, so this is super relevant. So I'll give you a perfect example. I used to weigh 105 kilos at age 29, okay? And my brother and I had started a startup, and what we did is we didn't want to take money from the family, so we took money out of our apartment that we owned, right? We literally took a loan, and we thought it was $100,000. We're like, this is gonna last me forever. This is like I can build Google with that, right? We didn't realize like how quickly that goes, right? And so in the process of doing that, I got really fat. And then as I was bending over to get into the car, I heard, and my suit pants ripped at the bottom, and my underwear was out in the wind, and I couldn't change, and it was a disaster, right? So this is when I discovered triathlon. I discovered triathlon just to lose weight. So I started to do this, and I started to like it more and more, met some very interesting people along the way, and started to train more and work less. Eventually, my brother gave me an ultimatum, right? And he said, like, we can't be doing this. We started the company together, and now you're playing, and I'm working, or what do you want to do, And I said, I'm doing business development. He's like, look, either you take this seriously, you come back and become a CEO of my company, okay, and then keep this as a hobby, or take this very seriously. I was like, what does that mean? He said, 2 things. You're not a kid. You're 30 years old now. You make money doing it, and you go to the top. I said, what's the top? He said, Olympic Games. I said, option B. I like it. Olympic Games. Yalla. Let's go to Olympic Games. Guys, I'm still overweight. I'm 30 years old. Most people are retiring. I don't even understand what it takes to be a professional athlete. I don't understand what it is to even qualify for the Olympic Games. I don't know any of that. Okay? It's sort of like this, right? So we sign up, but that signing up is not enough, right? Signing up is not enough. Then you have to commit. Then you have to sacrifice. Then you have to do everything that is in your power to reach your goal, right? So what do? I announce it. I make a Facebook page and I say I'm going to the Olympic Games. And people are like, you're crazy. You're not even a good amateur. And you're going to say that? I'm like, no, let's do it. Dream high, go. And the naysayers. The naysayers come out of the woodworks. They come out, they're like, oh, no, you cannot, you're too old, you're too fat, you're too slow, you're too this. Yeah. The problem is this though, you never allow naysayers to control your vision, your dream. You have to believe in your dream so without any doubts. And if there's a naysayer, you cut them out. And I lost a lot of friends over this, right? And so, obviously, I didn't make it to the Olympic Games. And one of the things is it doesn't really matter. Because when you put your 100%, when you put all your passion, when what you're doing day in, day out is 100% pure passion, even if you don't reach the goal, that along the way, the experience of that journey becomes so much more valuable. Look at what's happening here. I've added a brother to my family after what happened to us. Amy's a good friend of mine. I'm sitting in front of you talking about this. This is all through my failures, guys. This is all through the failures. And I just think that people have to stay comfortable with failing publicly. Wait, one last thing. I know I talked a lot.
I was never interrupt you.
No, but I know, but I feel bad. I'm talking so much.
Shame on you for grabbing the mic, Amy.
Yeah. Sorry. One last thing. Why is it that everybody is okay going to the gym? You guys go to the gym, right? You start to lift weights. Boom. Right? And you're okay going to failure. You're a big guy, you're doing the bench, and you're like, oh, you're starting to struggle, and somebody comes and they help you, but they don't even help you all the way. They just like, and you're like, oh, right? And you're failing publicly, right? For a long time, and the weights fall, and right? But we understand that in order for the muscle to grow, you gotta take it to failure. It's not comfortable, it's not fun. Why are we okay with that physically? But then when we come to talk about public failure in business, public failure and all that stuff, we say, no, do it privately, or try to spin it, or try to, no, we actually never spun anything, it just naturally just sort of happened. Sorry, that was long.
No, it was beautiful, absolutely. That's what we're here to hear. Do you want to add something, or shall I move on? Okay. I wanna talk about this idea of hope. Now, certainly in my experience, and I'm sure for a lot of entrepreneurs, I think one of the great tenets of survival as an entrepreneur is this kind of unwavering and sometimes delusional hope that everything is going to somehow turn out okay or turn out the way that you want it. But I think it's far easier to have hope when the challenges that you're facing are professional ones or business ones. I was very moved and captivated when watching the film. And their boat has flipped. Water is gushing into it. Their life raft isn't inflating. They have no means to inflate it. And realistically, they could potentially be a few minutes away from death. And Omar says on the film, he said, at that point, actually, Omar says on the film, Omar still thought he was in the race. Like, not only does Omar have hope that he's going to survive, he's still in it to win it. Meanwhile, Omar, he's like, I know we're not in the race, but he says that at no point did you think that you would not survive. What is that? Is that audacity? Is it arrogance? Is it faith? Is it strength? What is that?
I don't know. I mean, it's a difficult question. There were definitely times during the 13 hours when I felt that this was really like the end. I mean, the closest I came to completely giving up hope was on the ladder. There's a scene in the trailer, if you guys still remember it. It's dark. And then there's a figure sort of in yellow that sort of jumps and grabs on the ladder. This is eventually, after 13 hours, how we managed to get onto the ship. And I was basically hanging onto a ladder that had come half the way down this ship. This ship is a 200-meter, 35,000-ton vessel. It's not prepared at all for a rescue situation. And long story short, I was holding onto the ladder, my feet dangling in the air. There was no way to lift the ladder, so I had to climb the ladder up. This was on the back of 9 days of us, Omar and I, not able to stomach one solid meal, adrenaline pumping through our bodies, our muscles cramping everywhere. We were exhausted. If I had tried to hang on to a ladder now for 4 minutes, I might not be able to do it, but something was keeping me there. Eventually, my muscles completely gave up on me, and I don't know if you've ever done rock climbing or hold on to something for a very long time. Eventually, you can't. Your grip starts to fade, and you're falling down. And Omar even disappeared into the corner, and the last thing he saw was me holding on with one arm. At that point in time, the thing that brought me back to life is I had a flash, and that was the flash of my 6-year-old daughter. And I knew then that I wanted to keep on going, that I wanted to fight, and I wanted to survive. And the surge of energy came, and this was probably the last bit of energy that I had, and I managed to grab onto the ladder with the assistance of a wave that came and just sort of lifted me up from my ankles a little bit. And it was just I went 100%, and if I had missed the rung, I would have fell down into the ocean, and it would probably floating in the darkness. In those kind of conditions, I wouldn't have lasted a few minutes.
Can we just paint a picture for everyone? Because if they've not seen the film, they don't remember the trailer, they might not understand how it's heart-stopping. You're talking about a ship that, I mean, I don't know what is the height from here, للceiling مثلا مش عارفة مثلا higher even, and they're on this tiny little raft. It's a rubber dinghy, and they're sitting on it, and the wave, in order to reach the ladder on this sheer wall of the ship, the wave has to quite literally push them all the way up, and they have just these seconds to grab onto the ladder before the dinghy just falls right back down. That's the situation that they're in.
So what I'm trying to say really is, like, my daughter in this story represents maybe something else to me in business and to every one of you, and it's basically this hope, this thing that you're latching onto, or this higher purpose that keeps you ongoing. For me in business, it's the idea of the good society. It's the idea that every business is not only there to make money, it's there to create an impact in the world. It's there to make sure that it's kind to the environment, it's to support the local community that it's around, it's to take care of its people. Because if every business out there takes care of its people, then that's like, half the population taken care of. And so I work with this ideal that by carrying on to, in a bit at certain times, maybe wrongly so, thought like, I'm not going to fold the business, I'm going to keep on pushing, maybe sinking more of my own money into it or more effort. But the ideal for me might be different to everyone, but there has to be something in each and every one of you that makes you go beyond the call of duty. It makes you, when the times are toughest, you're still able to go on. And for me, it's this ideal that it's not just yes, it might be a small business or a medium-sized business, but there's something like more on the line here, and the sense of purpose of what the business is trying to achieve. And so if you're basically able to find out what this thing is, and every one of you, if they've started a business, definitely knows what this thing is. If it's not clear to you exactly, it just needs a bit of introspection and some thought, and you'll be able to get it. And once you know what that thing is, you need to hold on to that thing and always keep it in your heart, because you're going to need it when times are tough. And it's important to have hope. There was times in the raft when things were not as action packed, where Omar and I were basically, we had managed to manually inflate the raft, and we were basically about 3 or 4 hours just staring at each other. As beautiful as Omar is, it was a very difficult time. But Omar and I, we tried to make light of the situation. Like, the only things that came, even though there was a lot of dark stuff going on through our heads, the only thing that came out of our mouth were positive things. And this was the idea that we are a team, even though we're just 2 people. We're in this together, and we're gonna make it out of this together. And if we don't make it, we're gonna die trying.
Can I add something to this very moment? Actually, in that very moment that Omar is speaking about, and we're hanging out, and we're a bit delusional, we're hungry, and we have no idea if anybody's gonna come get us, right? Like, it's pretty desperate. And the thing that kept me going at that exact moment, I like to eat a lot. And so, food. And I looked at Omar, and this is true, this has actually happened. I looked at Omar, I said, look Omar, when we get out of here, you're going to take me to Abu Sid, and I want molokhia, وعاوز كوارع, okay? And I want mumbar, and I want asir asab, and I'm going to even have a shisha, and I'm not going to pay for anything, okay? And he said yes. And although this is, we laugh about it now, right? But at that very moment, that was my hope, right? Like I was hungry and I wanted to eat. So
where do you get that strength from, Omar?
Well, so it's interesting. Omar's answer actually made me reflect on my own answer right now on the stage. And I think we're wired. We have a lot of similarities, but we're also wired quite differently in some ways. When we capsized, I was inside the cabin. And everything was chaotic. I'm sitting on the ceiling. Everything is coming down. Everything is beeping. I have no idea if my brother is out there, if he's dead or alive, if he was pulled away from the boat. What am I gonna? It's a very stressful situation. And when that actually happened, that very second, two very crystal clear thoughts came to mind. One is what Amy said. No, not like this. And I even said it out loud, not like this. And what I meant by not like this, I meant I didn't want the race to end like this, okay? But also I didn't want to die like this. Like this was not the way that I wanted to go. And the second thing is, what have you just done for your family? What have you just done to your family? For what? For a thrill? For an adventure? For the two of us to accomplish something that's incredible? So what? This is going to be the darkest times of their lives. And to be completely honest, negative thoughts from that moment on moved away. Completely away. From there on, it was all business. And it was like, we are getting out of here, and there is no chance that I'm dying. Death wasn't even part of the vocabulary, but it was in the background. I'll say that. It was consistently in the background. That fear of it, right, kept us sharp. But at no point, we're like, no. Even when I told the story now, what did I say? I said, if we get out? No, we didn't say if we get out. I said, when we get out, we'll do this. When we get out, we'll do this. And one of those things, hope. There's this book I read a while back. It's called Hope is Not a Strategy. Hope is not good enough, right? It's good to have that innate thing, but action, right? When we were in 10-meter waves, 80 kilometer an hour winds, great white shark hunting territory, no communication, no support, the beacon, the emergency beacons didn't fire, 16 degrees Celsius water, it's over. It's game over. And you guys, all the startups, will go through many of those. Identical. It's over. I've had times in my startup when I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to pay my employees tomorrow. Not next week, right? Tomorrow, right? And it looks over. And it's such a huge mountain. So some people, like we mentioned, like Rambo, right? Like some people freeze. And they say status quo. We'll eventually get there. Kodak. Right? No, it's fine. Like the digital stuff is going to go away eventually. We're going to go back to film. Right? Let's just hang on. Right? So some people, status quo, freeze. Some people coil back. The only thing that we kept on saying, and Omar alluded to this earlier, we kept on saying over and over out loud was, how can we make our situation a little bit better? We're not trying to solve it. We do not see the solution, but status quo, no motion, no movement equals certain death. How do we do a little bit better? And once we get there, we don't rest on the laurels. We would ask the question again, how do we make our situation a little bit better? And consistently do that until eventually, hopefully, the solution presents itself. And that's the same exact thing in business. Hope you're not always going in there like, we'll be fine. No. You're going to be scared. You're going to be like this. But you keep on moving. You keep on moving. You keep on moving. And eventually, you give yourself a chance to succeed. And that links back to the failure thing, right? The difference between winners and losers isn't in failure. The losers accept the failure. They say, khalas, I stop here. This is done. And now the failure stands. The winners, they keep on going and refuse to accept the failure, death, whatever was going to happen to us. We refuse to accept it. So we will keep on moving forward until we don't have a choice anymore.
Thank you, Omar. I'm just going to take the thread from what you said about hope is not a strategy. But you know what is a strategy is calculating risk. That's a good strategy sometimes.
That's nice.
And you know, as entrepreneurs, so much of what we do every day is kind of negotiating the risk factor. And I know that a lot of what both of you have done or do in general outside of this Atlantic row might seem pretty crazy to people. But actually, I think there's a lot of the backstory that people don't understand that makes it a very calculated risk. Omar, before you took on Everest, I mean, this was something that was growing in your mind for years. And Omar would go back and forth from his career as a banker in London and Hong Kong, and he'd take a year off and climb some mountains and come back and then take a month off and climb a couple of other mountains. And so by the time it came to your moment to take on that you know, the biggest summit of all, this was, khalas, it was part of your livelihood. You were an expert, a mountain climber. You were ready for this. Omar, similarly, when it came to your sporting career as a triathlete, this was your livelihood. You were a professional triathlete. You were at the top of your game. You were amongst the best in the world. And then suddenly, for some reason, what you guys do with this row is completely the opposite. You've never rowed across a pool, let alone across the Atlantic Ocean. And in the film, I think it's one of the event organizers, says something that really struck me. She goes, there are people with decades worth of maritime experience, sailors for whom this is their livelihood, and they would not fathom of taking on a journey like this because the risks are just too big. They're too much, and the chances are so slim. So, given all that, my question to you is there, be it in something like this or in business, a risk that just isn't worth it?
I think in business, in adventure, certainly, like, you have to be audacious. I mean, you have to basically, again, going back to the whole mind and brain thing, some things you can't really think about way too much. The idea of crossing the Atlantic Ocean came to me while I was on a plane going to the States, looking out of the window, seeing this vast ocean and thinking this would be a good idea. Obviously, you know, how an idea, something goes from this is a good idea to actually, like, I'm going to actually do this, is something that, it's a test that I have for these things. Like, because I've had all of these ideas, you know, climbing Everest, doing all of these things, and some ideas stick and some things don't. So the first test for me is that if people come to me and repeatedly telling me that this is crazy and I would be stupid to do it, for me this is the first reason why I should definitely do it. Because anything that anyone has achieved that is worth anything, and when I mean worth anything, as has contributed something to the society, to the person, to humanity, has something that seemed crazy in the beginning. And then I forgot obviously what the second thing was, but the idea. So this was like a really important thing. And then when I went to Omar actually with the idea, like you said, Amy, we had never rowed actually, and I had this idea of, like, in order for me to be able to do this. Oh, sorry. The second thing is, the second thing is that when I have this idea, it takes hold of me. When it keeps coming up, like, day after day, week after week, and I can't shake off this idea, I realize that the only way to get this idea out of my head is to actually try and do it. And that would be the craziest thing. And when I went to Omar with this idea of crossing the ocean, he had just been told that he'd been injured beyond repair, let's say, in terms of going to the Olympics, and he was in a state of maybe, you know, everything that he's been building towards for the last few years had completely disintegrated. His doctor had told him, basically, you'll be fine eventually, but don't do a bunch of things. One of them was rowing, even though he doesn't row. And I came to him literally within weeks from that and told him, let's go and cross the Atlantic Ocean. And within half an hour, we had made a decision. So there's something about making a decision. And when you make that decision, you have to have the benefit of, I've done a few experiences and been in a few situations that make me feel that I'm up to this. But I know that I need to make a commitment and a decision. And then, like Omar was saying, make it public. The public doesn't have to be to the world, but it's public, could be for yourself, for your teammate. You make a commitment, and now you're in this chaos, this mess, this faced with this huge mountain, and now you have to battle. And I have to say that the thing that really excites me about life the most is getting into these battles. And this is not necessarily, it could be a flaw, but the times in my life that I had not had a big goal or a big challenge in front of me, I become complacent, I become lazy, I don't train as often, I don't take care of myself as often. Somehow my life is not really, not everything is not sort of tight. When I put myself that goal, all of a sudden everything changes. Time has a completely different value. Time with my family, time training, time at work, everything becomes, I have to start to streamline, and I become a better person. And I like myself when I'm in that situation. Unfortunately, it comes under duress, and I haven't quite figured out a way to achieve this kind of level of performance without this pressure. But that's kind of the way it has been so far, and that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. When you know that the buck stops with you, when you know that if you're in a company, even if you're holding a relatively big position, you don't do your job, someone eventually, even if you have to be let go, someone's going to come and sweep or restructure or do something and fix the situation. But when you're at the mantle and you don't rise to the challenge, you know that it's. And sometimes, honestly, I have to say, sometimes as much as we say aspiring to a greater good or aspiring to something positive, sometimes the fear of losing everything, the fear of everything that you've been building, everything you've been working on, disintegrating, sometimes that's much more powerful. And you have to play with these two things. Sometimes in terms of motivating yourself, motivating your team, motivating your stakeholders, sometimes you have to play with these two things.
Omar, we're running out of time, so I want you to answer this question, and then we're going to have one final question.
All right, I'll keep it short. So what Omar said is 100% accurate. And fire, right? Fire is not enough. To get, this passion that you guys feel from me, that's not enough. You got to do more. And a perfect example of this is also from the outside is different than from the inside. So on the outside, if I came to you and I said, I'm going to jump out of a plane, you'd be like, what? You're crazy. This is silly. The risks are too high. It's impossible. And okay, but then you start to study it. And I explain to you, no, dude, we have this thing called a parachute, and then that parachute goes, and then we have another backup parachute, and if that, and all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, sort of like the example of the plane, right? It's safer than it is. It's the same thing with what we're doing, right? If we start and we just fire and we say, let's sign up and go, that's reckless. Right? That's crazy. That's going out there and shooting. No, you gotta then commit, right? And we spent 18 months committing to that, studying the risks. And the only reason why we're standing in front of you is because we studied real good. We studied really, really hard, and we learned all these different bases. And then the other thing is the naysayers. So one of the things is 18 months out of the Olympic Games, I broke my ankle. 6 months out, I herniated 2 discs in my back. As they're fixing my discs in my back, they diagnosed me with diabetes. So now I'm 36-year-old diabetic, freshly diagnosed diabetic, who's a professional athlete. I'm super confused about the whole thing. So you can imagine when I went to the doctors and said to them, hey, can I do this thing? First of all, my diabetes doctor laughed. He's like, you're diabetic. It's impossible. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm explaining to you the decision has been made. Now it's up to you to figure out how to do it in a safe manner. Right? So if there's a will, there's a way. You do it, right? And the same thing with the back doctor. When I went over there and he said, wow, your herniation is 50%. You can start training again as a triathlete, but avoid heavy deadlifts, heavy squats, and the rowing machine. And I go, doc, I just signed up to row across the Atlantic, right? But that's the whole thing, right? You look at it, and this actually goes to your point. That's way riskier. That's crazy. You have insulin on board. You have to do all these things. Those are excuses. Those are excuses. You study it, and maybe there is something when you look at the equation, it doesn't make sense. I believe in logic. And if it doesn't make sense, I don't do it. And I don't care if everybody around me is doing it, and if the whole world is saying, no, you know what, the valuation of these companies, it should be about market share. No, I don't believe that. It's about profit. And if you can make profit, I get that, then that makes sense to me. And now, with that all these companies are busting, and people now, the new hot trend, in New York is like, hey guys, let's look at this profit thing, right? Because it doesn't make sense, right? So I think logic. Use logic to determine whether a risk is worth taking or not. And rest assured with one thing, the difference between an idiot and a genius is in the outcome. So for me, I say something crazy, You look at me, you go, you're crazy, right? I go and I do it, I come back. I'm not crazy, I'm a genius. This guy sees things in a different way. This guy is unbelievable, right? But if what you thought was going to happen happens and I fail, oh, well, of course he's an idiot. And all companies do that. All companies do that. I know you guys are going to talk about a Facebook guy later tonight. Did you guys know that when the two founders, they had applied for a job at Facebook, right? And they got rejected, right? And then they came back and sold it for, 15 billion? Right? So everybody makes mistakes, so rest assured with that, and that should push you through.
So thank you so much, Omar. I'm going to wrap it up with, I think, the obvious question. And just something, at the end of the film, the captain of the ship who saved them, or the captain who saved them, says, this wasn't me, because what happened was impossible. The fact that they're alive today is impossible. They are here because of God. And now, irrespective of your faith or your spiritual alignment, is there a point where you think maybe that's a sign that not again? And yet, I know you are both all about the idea of always getting right back on that horse and getting back on the bike and doing it again. And so given all of that, and given that, God or whatever power saved you that time, are you going to attempt an Atlantic row again?
No. I think my mom would kill me.
Yeah, I was just going to say that this question is usually answered differently if our parents are in the room. But actually, I mean, the reason why I wouldn't attempt it again is because it was an extremely miserable experience. I mean, Omar doesn't stop talking. No, I'm just kidding. It was actually like Omar spoke 2 words in 8 days, if you guys believe it, on the row. It's an experience where you sleep 40 minutes every 4 hours, you row 12 hours a day, the salt water is like everywhere, it's cold, it's damp, you're sleeping on a wet pillow and a wet sheet. When mountaineering for me is enjoyable because at the end of the day you can kind of have a good meal, have a good night's rest, and tomorrow's a new day. This rowing is a continuous thing, and it's important to find joy in life. Yes, you can do things that are dangerous, but you have to find joy in the things that you do. And for me, I realized that the seas, the oceans, it's not my domain. Had I really enjoyed this experience, but it broke me, and I couldn't complete it, I think I would definitely be up for going back. But again, going back to how the thing happened is yes, we failed in the sense that we had this idea to row across the Atlantic Ocean to get to the other side. We didn't make it. In fact, we completed something like 20% of our journey. And we came back and we had no intention of making a film. We had started rowing because we thought this journey in some ways resembles some of what refugees go through, and we thought maybe we will be able to use our platform, if people are listening, to shed light about this cause. We had no idea what would happen to us, that we would be in such a dire situation. Through this experience, we realized some really powerful things, and because I actually, I know this is about entrepreneurship, but I always want to say this if I can. The plight of refugees, the cause itself, I think is the most important thing facing humanity today, and it's really important for all of us to the way we deal with this thing as countries, as nations, as everything will dictate the face of humanity for the years to come. And for us, we're so grateful and blessed to have been given the opportunity actually to turn our experience into something positive. We realized from our journey actually, and which is what we tried to relay in the film, and hopefully the film will be screening soon in Cairo, and we hope that some people can go out and watch it, is that we realized that as horrific as our experience was, and maybe in this last hour you realized some tidbits of how it was dangerous and how our life was on the line, we realized that what we went through was only a fraction of what refugees go through on a daily and weekly basis. I mean, at the end of the day, we chose to do this. We had the best equipment. We trained. We knew what we were doing. And even after we were saved, it only took us about a week or 2 weeks to go back to our families. To try to imagine that if you were doing this, you were attempting something like of this magnitude, and you had to do it. You had to do this in order to survive, and you're going somewhere not knowing where you're going to go, if you're going to be sent back. So we came into this wanting to raise awareness for this cause with a huge, tremendous appreciation and respect for every refugee that goes through these journeys. But we came out of it. If we haven't succeeded in the individual journey, I think the success for me is having gone through this and developed a kind of appreciation to this cause and importance of this mission that transcends anything that I would have felt and had I not gone through this experience. And so, having gone through this experience, both Omar and I and UNHCR and everyone and the director and everyone that's involved in making this project happen, we're committed that for the rest of our lives we want to do everything that we can, everything in our power, to make people feel something, because unfortunately it's something that's become desensitized in the media. People looking at it as numbers, as statistics, and there are individuals, there's families, there are people behind every story, and the world is not doing enough. And it's important that everybody speaks up, and it's important that everybody knows that this is an extremely important thing and must be at the top of everybody's agenda.
Yeah. He did. I mean, he said it all.
Omar Nour, Omar Samra, thank you so much.
You like what you hear? Then leave us a review on Apple Podcast. You can also get exclusive access to all the updates, the upcoming events, and the most inspiring stories by subscribing on startupswb.com/subscribe. I'll repeat it, startupswb.com/subscribe. I'd like to thank our amazing podcast partners in Egypt, Rcast, for producing this entire season.